Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're going to begin today a study of the book of Lamentations, which I hope you're going to enjoy. Just absolutely love this book. It focuses on a very dark time, the aftermath of the destruction of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, and the hauling away of God's people into Babylonian captivity. And it describes that terrible time. Uh, but as dark as it is, like Ecclesiastes and like Psalm 137, the language is just so beautiful that the beauty of the language itself, a language which is spare and honest, and yet so hauntingly beautiful, provides light. But we also have, in the midst of the storm, this place of calm, this place of light. We're going to see that as well. We're going to take a few sessions to introduce the book of Lamentations. It's generally associated as being written by Jeremiah, and I think he's the most likely candidate myself, but there is some question, even from the text, as to whether he's the author of Lamentation. But today we want to talk about the destruction of Jerusalem and what happened when Jerusalem fell. Jerusalem nearly fell to the Assyrians during Hezekiah's reign, but God rescued them. The Assyrians are no more. That episode really brought about the downfall of the Assyrian Empire. They had the large part of their army, their armed forces, there at the siege of Jerusalem, and in one night, an angel of the Lord killed 250,000 troops and basically eliminated the large portion of their army. And within a few decades, they were no more. This vast empire, this first great empire in world history, and the Babylonians were ascendant and much more successful than the Assyrians, although they will be dominant for less time, because then the Medo-Persians, the Persians, and then the Persians themselves will be ascendant and have a much larger empire and rule for a much longer period of time. But the Babylonians have been dominating world politics for some time, and the kings of Israel, the kings of Judah, the southern kingdom, have played their cards badly. What they should have done is just trust in the Lord, but they kept trying to make alliances, first with Babylon and then with Egypt, and just trying to balance their allegiances to the superpowers which surround them, with the result that they get destroyed and taken into captivity by King Nebuchadnezzar. And we learn about this in Chronicles, and we learn about this in Jeremiah. We have the longest account in Jeremiah. In Chronicles, we're told that the Lord brought against them the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of the sanctuary, had no compassion on young man or virgin, old man or infirm, gave them all into their hand, and all the articles of the house of God, great and small, and all the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and his officers were they brought them all to Babylon, and they burnt the house of God. And broke down the walls of Jerusalem, and burnt all its fortified buildings with fire, destroyed all its valuable articles. And those who had escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and his sons until the rule of the king of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths, and the days of its desolation it kept Sabbath until 70 years were complete. So that's the account that we have in the book of Jeremiah, in the book of Chronicles. Jeremiah, at the end of the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah 52, beginning with verse 4, gives a much longer description. But what I wanted is to notice, because almost all of 52 is about the destruction of Jerusalem. But then we have these three verses in 28 through 30, which talk about the captivity itself. And it says that these are the people whom Nebuchadnezzar carried away into exile in the seventh year, in his seventh year, 3,023 Jews. And in the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar, 832 persons from Jerusalem. And in the 23rd year of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried into exile 745 Jewish people, 4,600 persons in all. So over the course of some time, Jews were taken into captivity. In fact, there was an earlier captivity before the destruction of Jerusalem, in which many people were carried away, particularly from Jerusalem, and Ezekiel was carried away. That was in 607, 608 BC, right around there, and then in 587 BC we have the destruction of Jerusalem, and then in 539 BC, we have the decree of Cyrus, which allows the Jews to go back. If you count from the first captivity, the first carrying away of the children of Israel, to the decree of Cyrus, you get your 70 years. You don't get it from the destruction to 539. But God gave a period of time, 70 years, between the first captivity and the return that would have to take place. So this is what happened. And the Babylon, and when you think about a city, a major city with thick walls and stone buildings, the time and the effort it takes just to destroy that wall, those walls and those buildings. You can't just burn stone buildings with fire. You have to deconstruct them yourself and destroy them. Takes work to turn that rock into rubble, and they did. They took the time to do that. Nebuchadnezzar had it with Jehoiakim, and carries him into captivity. It does worse than that. If you read the account we have in Jeremiah, he murdered all of King Jehoiakim's sons in front of his eyes and then put his eyes out. So that would be the last thing you would see. The destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians was quite brutal and savage. We get a sense of that when we read Psalm 137. It just is, or it just was, I should say. But the destruction was complete. So I just want us to get a notion of the destruction of Jerusalem and the captivity itself, because it did take some time after capturing Jerusalem to tear the place down. It's not like 9/11, where you could go the very next day and see the rubble. It would take some time. And so there is some time between the event and the writing of the book of Lamentations. Not a lot of time, but a little bit of time has elapsed. I think we're going to see that in the text itself. Okay, next time we're going to talk about Jeremiah and Jeremiah's fate, because Jeremiah did not go to Babylon. He was not carried to Babylonian captivity. And we'll talk about what Jeremiah had to say about Babylonian captivity, or what God had to say through the prophet Jeremiah. We'll mention that next time. Thank you so much for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.